Hello and welcome to the Purple Rock Podcast. I am your host this week, Andy, and with me is the return of Mrs. Emma. Mrs. Emma, how are you doing?
It's actually Ms., but thank you.
I was actually wondering about that, but then I didn't care. Was the thing?
Yeah,
It ruined my joke, so I didn't
I
want to
mean
go
that
with it.
checks
But
out.
yeah,
It's not as fun when it doesn't change. I know
that's
that's
right.
a little less exciting to not change it on Facebook, but it's also I prefer it that way. So there you go.
There you go. Yes, but I did want to point out that you were missing for a big chunk of this for I guess a good reason.
Yeah.
So based on last week's podcast that with John and Corey, I think the only logical way to start this one would be you and I getting into about a 20-minute discussion on the filmography of Mike White, right?
Sounds great. We can talk all about School of Rock, which is the only one I've seen, but
There you go. I think I've also seen the Jennifer Aniston one, the Good Girl, Good Woman, Good. I don't. Good
oh, that one's supposed to be good, isn't it?
No, it wasn't. Like it was
No?
supposed to be. That's why I watched it. But
Oh, is that the one when she was first starting and it was like, well, Office Space was good, maybe that'll be good too, and it wasn't?
I think it was after her string of poorly received romantic comedies. This was her proving that she was an actress.
Oh, I might be thinking of a different movie then.
Yeah, we're doing it. We're really doing it.
We made it work. We made it work.
People are like, "Oh God, skip." Although this audience might be more interested in a discussion of Chuck and Buck than WWE wrestling. Although I found that discussion interesting. Although I've also found wrestling interesting in the past. Instead,
well, the most I know about wrestling is The Rock existing and Glow, and I still listened to that entire podcast because I'm supportive.
Yes, and also you have a weird predilection of where you just need to complete the podcasts that are in your stream.
This is very true, and I felt so called out while I was on my honeymoon listening while brushing my teeth, and then I hear Andy being like, oh yeah, Emma's not gonna listen to this. Actually, she probably will because she has a compulsive need to listen to everything. And I was like, well, he's clearly not wrong.
But good for you. You actually managed in that time to at least skip one or two RHAPs. So it's small steps. Much like you expanding your diet. It's small steps. Go from bread to toast. Wait, I'm supposed to talk about you like this when you're not here. When you're here, I'm a gracious host. I'm happy to have you. And how about we actually instead start talking about this episode, the merge. The merge came, and what did you think of this episode? What was your general feeling of it?
Yeah, it was definitely exciting. It's been I think a pretty solid season. The merge is usually tends to be a great episode when Julie McGee's not quitting or Joe Dowdle's not getting medevaced. So it was fun. And what I thought was fascinating is despite being a unanimous decision, which is crazy, it was still a wild episode. And the fact that it was unanimous surprised me. It makes sense, kind of after the fact, but it surprised me in that moment.
Yeah, and actually, not only was it a unanimous decision, it was the decision that they introduced in the opening sequence of the episode. Opening sequence, we get Carl, just throwing Elizabeth under the bus, and everybody being like, yeah, sure, cool, Elizabeth. And it's so much so that it's like, well, I guess it can't be Elizabeth because that's not the way Survivor works. But it was Elizabeth. So they took what was an obvious boot. They did not obscure that it was obvious, yet still was able to inject a bunch of drama and doubt. And some of that doubt, obviously, is because of the meta game that viewers play. It's like, oh, well, if it's this, then it can't be. But also it's because of the actions of the episode itself. The way Angelina tries to change things, that sort of thing. So yeah, I thought it was a really good episode, and also maybe helps prove what a lot of people who love nothing more but to complain about edits is to say, you don't need to obscure the results, you just need to tell us the story. And in this case, yes, although I guess they also kind of obscured the results. I'm not sure where that falls, but you don't necessarily need to hide all of the strategy from us, even if it ends up being obvious in the end.
Yeah, because usually I feel like if there's an episode where it's just kind of the whole way, someone's getting voted out, it's something like the douchebag episode, where it's like a big major downfall. And while what's interesting is it sounds like maybe for the players, it was sort of like the big downfall for Elizabeth, but on the show, she was never really viewed in that sense.
Yeah, it just kind of seemed like it was going to be a David, and then, personal beefs within the David group made it easily her. But it's a good point to get into it. Where did things go wrong for Elizabeth in your estimation? Why was she possibly the only unanimous merge boot in the history of the show? Maybe that's probably not true. Maybe that's like Kobe. No, even he would probably didn't have Janu voting for him, but it's unusual to say the least. Even Chris Noble had a couple people not voting for him. So where do you think things went wrong for Elizabeth?
Well, apparently, simply by like just not getting along with Carl for whatever reason. And, I guess freaking out about the bed. I mean, maybe just kind of going on Survivor a little too soon after a major surgery.
Yeah, I mean, it could easily just be something as simple as that. For me, I was thinking that it went wrong with the very first thing she did to draw our attention in Survivor that, many people praised her for, and that was in episode 2 when she, went out of her way to save Lyrsa, which, I didn't get to comment on the time because I was taking the week off. But even at the time, I was like, is that a good move? It worked out fine. It was good. She got to keep her friend, and obviously people were excited about it because they would much rather see Lyrsa stay in the game than Jessica. But I think the lesson here might be, especially in modern Survivor, which is, swap heavy, you're never going to be on that tribe for very long. If you have like a unanimous boot that isn't you, and it isn't creating a situation where you would be next, if it, or you would be definitely next, because maybe she would have been next, but just let it happen. Maybe don't rock the boat, because that what ends up happening is you leave a lot of people in the game who you just betrayed one vote in, and you might not get it any time. It might not work out in your favor that you will be able to prevail in that situation. And that's exactly what happened to Elizabeth. She won her first vote. She was up in numbers as a result. And then swaps happened and she was down numbers all the way. And the person that she expended a lot of game and social capital to save, she never got to play with again. They never went to tribal council again, her and Lyrsa. So it was like, that was a whole lot of effort, and all that really resulted, the only benefit, or actually not benefit, the only result for Elizabeth herself was that Carl and Davy hated her, and she had to live with that.
Yeah, and of course, as it always is, some of that is luck. She had the bad luck to be swapped precisely with the people who, most were upset about it. Especially Carl, joining the tribe. It's almost like if they hadn't lost that first challenge, maybe, then, she'd be in the minority. Maybe Alec would have like not randomly decided, let's put out Natalia. But Carl was very close, apparently was just very close to Jessica and seemed to really take that hard. And then that plus, it just seems like her personality rubbed him the wrong way is enough to, I think, compound that to where.
Yeah, absolutely luck. If she winds up with Gabby and Christian or Lyrsa, it's no problem at all. But, the point of more I was getting at is like, that can happen. By making that move, she pissed off 3 people in the game. She was lucky enough that one of them quit in B, but then you're still leaving a couple people for what? And again, she felt close to Lyrsa. She wanted to do it, but it just probably wasn't worth it, especially because Lyrsa herself was somebody who continued to struggle to not get voted out until she did. Elizabeth could have very easily been voted out unless Alec went crazy. So it's just like, because in Survivor now, the most it seems like you're ever going to be on a tribe is like 3 votes. And that's if you lose every time. Just let it happen, I think, might be the thing, because if she just lets it happen, if they just vote out and Jessica's there, then she hasn't shown her cards. She's, a David through and through, and everybody might be happy. And then the way she otherwise seemed to want to play, which was very loyalty-based game, it was, every time, with the swap or with the merge, she was always like, how can me and the other Davids, manage the situation? How can we get one person on our side? She was still very much thinking of a team, but she already broke up that team in the beginning. And it might be unfortunate. It's like, I really like this person, but more often than not, you should probably be like, oh, well. And frankly, another person who rocked the boat in the very first vote is Angelina. And while it's worked so far, you could argue that she also probably would have been better off just letting it be and letting Natalie go when instead of Jeremy.
Yeah, her behavior today, or not today, her behavior on the episode this week definitely, I think, highlighted why I thought it wasn't a great move to vote out Jeremy before. And now we know there's, whatever personal reasons that may have actually led to that, but because she was going so aggressively about it, and she's still doing that, and it is in fact rubbing people the wrong way. Like we all, you were discussing, I guess this probably was in comments on Twitter or something, because neither of us were hosting last week. But you're discussing how, Angelina's not really a threat because everyone sees right through her. And, we proved it this time, where she's not on just a certain tribe of people. Like, it's everybody, and they all saw through her immediately.
Yeah, and maybe, because they've seen this act before and they let her have her way the first time. It's like, okay, sure, why not Jeremy? In fact, because mostly they were on that wavelength of let's just let this first vote happen. And it did turn out to be a unanimous vote for Jeremy. But they've seen this act. They saw her do this there. They saw her try to win a jacket. And it was like, this is who Angelina is. So I think maybe the lesson is, if you can avoid it, again, if your neck's not on the line, either because the target is you or, you're the other person. And frankly, if either of those situations are true, you probably don't have the ability to turn the whole tribe around. But at that point, try what you can. Just don't show your cards too soon, because it worked out this way for Elizabeth. And again, mostly bad luck. Hopefully most people would have been able to overcome that one vote by now. But apparently with a Carl, it's not going to be that way. But Carl is not unique in the sense of reality show contestant who bears grudges. And so that's kind of what happened. Is there anything Elizabeth could have done to prevent getting voted out this week, you think?
Well, she almost won immunity, so
that would have helped.
That would have helped.
But how about when she receives, the also valuable intel that everybody was voting for her from Angelina?
Yeah, I mean, from, obviously we can't prove this, but I was kind of hypothesizing this anyway, and she at least claims this in exit press, obvious, grain of salt there, but that it was right before they were going to tribal. And if that's the case, I mean, it would have been tough for her anyway.
Yeah.
So
I would say, sorry, continue.
Oh, yeah, but yeah, that, I mean, because you would have to get all of the Davids on her side, which she didn't have, and at least one Goliath, or I guess all the Davids but Carl and two Goliaths. Yeah, and people are, have said oh, maybe tell Angelina oh, okay, who do you want to, you're upset with Dan, let's vote out Dan. But it just doesn't seem like Angelina's in the, mindset to vote out a Goliath. Maybe she could say okay, you wanted to target Christian, you try to go after Christian. But again, none of the Davids are going to go for that, because they're all either closer to Christian or don't like her.
Yep. And I'd say they are all closer to Christian than they are her. And I think
I guess also, by default, I don't think of, Carl and Davy as being close to Christian, but because they don't like her.
Exactly. Which I think also speaks to flaws in Elizabeth's game. Who was her close connection? Lyrsa, who she didn't play half the game with. And again, some of that's very bad luck, right? If she had been on a tribe with not Carl, or not Davy, because honestly, even, irrespective of Carl, Davy never really seemed to be very happy with her. He was more than ready and quick to throw her under the bus when it looked like it was one of them, and looked like he was successful in that. But yeah, I think this is the flip side of the loyalty game that some people have. They form really strong connections. It's that's my person. Well, especially early on, you need lots of connections. And, I think her connection with Christian was only via Gabby. And, a connection with Gabby is nice. It certainly helped with that one vote, but I don't know if she's going to be a power broker in this game. So I think, Elizabeth probably needed a certain comfort level within the game with people that she likes. She doesn't like lazy people or stupid people. I can't remember what her two things, but
which I agree on one and I don't agree on the other. Guess which one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure she would, do me as one or the other. At least, when you're a work ethic person. And it's just so I don't think there was anything she could have done other than, as you say, win immunity, because she wasn't in the position to do it, even if she could have come up with a better argument. And I think she came up with a really poor one of, hey, how about one of you Goliaths come over to us Davids? That's a terrible argument no matter what tact you're trying to go for, no matter how much time you've had to put in place. In fact, she seemed like every tactic she tried was such a doom for failure. I almost have to wonder what Elizabeth was thinking was happening prior to being informed by Angela that it was her. What was her move? I guess maybe she and all the Davids thought they were going after someone, and that information was never.
She pitched Dan.
Yeah, maybe Dan. And again, that information was never relayed to us because that was a go nowhere plan. And it was go nowhere because she didn't even have David's on her side. Yeah. And I think it was interesting is when she tells Gabby, and Gabby is like, "Oh, you should blow it up tribal council." And I have no problem believing that was a last minute thing. I think Gabby's reaction is, "Oh, good. We're still voting for you," because that's what her worry was, right? She was worried that they had all gone off and started talking about things. It's like, is it no longer Elizabeth? Are they trying to do something else? So then it's like, okay, cool. We'll all just vote for you and it's no problem, but you should totally do something because that, keeps Elizabeth on her side for, jury votes or whatever, but also can help, muddy the waters for future votes for her. But I don't think at any section as Gabby had Elizabeth's best interest at heart there. It was just kind of like, whew.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is used to help, I think, sort of show dissension in Goliath and stuff. And yeah, when Elizabeth was pitching Alec, and even Alec, who was like, "Oh yeah, I'm in a 3-2 majority. I'll just vote out this one girl who I supposedly have a connection with because she's kind of bugging me." Even Alec was like, "Yeah, but if I go with you guys, then it's like 6 and just me, and that doesn't seem like a good idea."
Yeah, it's like I don't know that Elizabeth had any moves other than her very first move, which I'm arguing now was part of her downfall. Because in the merge or in the swap episode that ended up saving her, it was really Davy working with Alec, and then Alec's own desires, which flipped it. I do think Elizabeth might have helped push him over the board if his decision was truly made at Tribal Council, which, given that he seemed to impart that information to her at Tribal Council, suggests that it very well could have been. It also could have been a fact that's like, I don't want to share this with her until the last second. But yeah, it's just kind of like her thing was like, hey, I'm really good with my people, and we're all going to go down together. How about you join us instead? Because that could be cool because reasons. And now to give her some credit in the swap that, she did eventually figure out that I might need to start, throwing Davy under the bus. She just seemed to realize that too late. So maybe she figured that out here. But we never see her say, what about Carl though? It's just kind of like, she was still like trying to pitch the losing battle of we 6 who aren't that close to each other, which is something she should have known that. She seemed like she kind of understood that her and Carl weren't best friends, given, the bamboo situation and all of that.
And Carl would have actually been a decent one to pick, not just because, he didn't like her, but, you could kind of make the argument to the Goliath, like he and everyone else, like, that people were saying in predictions. He went to exile. He might have an advantage or an idol. He won't be expecting it. So let's, just get rid of that now. Wouldn't have been a terrible plan. It might not have worked, but it wouldn't have been.
It probably shouldn't. Like, that's actually the reason why you shouldn't vote for Carl in the very first vote is like, we don't know what he has. And this is the most likely time, one of the most likely times he might play an advantage. This is clearly what they're thinking with Dan, is that we need to lull him into a sense of security. But it's the thing you try if Carl's your guy, right? And also just, I'm one of you, not, we Davids are super tight. Wouldn't you like to be the last of us? That's just a terrible argument all the time. And unfortunate, because I think otherwise Elizabeth struck me as a fairly intelligent person. I liked her in confessionals. I liked, her observations about, the game. I liked when she was talking about how Dan and Kara had spent all this time. She's like, whether it's romantic or not is, irrelevant. It's a couple.
I really liked that because it proves the point of why romantic, sort of showmances are targeted. It's not because like, oh, I don't like that they're finding love. It's because it's a pair, and a pair is valuable, whether it's, a pair is, potentially dangerous, whether it's Rob and Amber, or whether it's Steven and JT.
Yeah. And then I guess the extra added one for romances is like, well, that person is clearly offering something that I can't, It's like, you see, Mike White and Nick as an alliance. It's like, I could probably become a better alliance partner for Nick. But yeah, you might not be able to edge out Kara, from this, from Dan. Certainly not, because he is so smitten. So yeah, I think she was doomed from the time that she didn't win immunity, basically. But I think for what doomed her, you need to go farther back in the game. So I was thinking for the rest of the episode, what we could just do, because as we said, it was actually a fairly straightforward episode, albeit a pretty entertaining one, is let's check in on everybody left in the game and discuss what they did in this episode, if they did do something this episode, and also just how we feel about where they are going forward, both, game-wise, and also if, we like them or anything, what we liked, especially for you. No, people haven't heard your opinions about these players in a while. For me, it's been 2 weeks, so things are radically different, and people always want to hear what I have to say. So let's start with the other person who had a lot to do this episode, and that was Angelina. What do we think? I think we should start probably with her attempts to get the vote on Christian, because what a smooth operator she is.
Good God, yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's as an idea,
pretty good,
especially because obviously, and like there's evidence in that episode. Well, the reason why it's a good idea is also like one of the reasons why it didn't work is that many of the other Goliaths, including ones who hadn't been on a tribe with him yet, I don't understand Alec at all.
No, we have to get to that, but it's just like he's like
that's a parenthetical, but like it just a lot of people want to work with him, and he's very good in puzzles, which do tend to still be a thing in individual immunity in a way that brute strength isn't necessarily. Yeah, makes sense. But wow, that execution though.
Yeah, and what I love is her reaction to not getting her way and the pouting and how like, oh, he just railroaded me about it and all that. It's like, that's you. That's exactly what you did, and it's just perfect. And this is what people do all the time, is that they react most strongly and they hate that which is most like them. It's like, how dare somebody be like this, and they can't see how it is. Like, I would probably be like just beside myself if people like interrupted me on the podcast or something, right? Or the best is like I really get frustrated with other Survivor commenters who just think that they're so smart. And it's just like, yeah, obviously I know what's bothering me here. And that's exactly what it was for her. It's just because she wasn't like, feeling people, from what we saw, she wasn't feeling people out, suggesting it. It was just like, it has to be Christian. And then she just pushed forward with their arguments. And then we're like, good. Are we good? And then obviously they weren't, but they weren't comfortable to say it, which I suppose if you are like a supreme game player, that could be a way. You can just force what you want onto people and they will do it, except that I don't know how successful a tactic that is if you're not, say, Boston Rob 50% of the time, because the other 50% actually isn't that successful even for heat.
Yeah, I did really love the idea that she's just like, I just feel like everyone else decided, to do this way when we were all in agreement. I'm like, well, if they all switched it, I don't think that, and they switched it back to the original plan, not like a brand new thing.
Yeah.
I think maybe just go with it. And especially, yeah, that's the thing. Like, well, there are a couple of, like, yes, targeting Christian makes sense. And the fact that they didn't vote him out will probably hurt several of the Goliaths, if not all of them, if he like wins or something. But, in theory, like, yeah, he's going to be good at some puzzles, but he's probably not going to win like every challenge. There's going to be opportunity. But my favorite line was when she said, they have to do it while they have the numbers.
The numbers will only get better if we vote out Elizabeth.
Yeah, like I feel like it's the riskiest at the merge where you don't fully know where everyone stands. So don't target the one that other people like. Like, yeah, that's why he's the threat. But if other people like them, that might push them to flip because, oh, I just can't bear to lose Christian so soon. And Yeah, and you only need one person to flip. Maybe wait until it would take many, many people to flip.
Yeah, no, and it's just clearly a person who is very accustomed to getting her own way and doesn't understand that always pushing to get things your way will often make other people feel like they never get their way, whether they are your friends, coworkers, partners, or even just service industry people. It's like, okay, fine, I will give you this discount because I'm tired of dealing with you, but I hope I never have to deal with you again. If you're a self-centered person, you don't factor in that you're putting somebody else off. It's just like, yeah, why doesn't everybody just ask? And that was this was her way. It was even the right way, but it's going to push people into uncomfortable areas. She should have been able to sense it. It wasn't like people were like, yes, absolutely, you're right about Christian. They're kind of like, I mean, yeah, I guess. Like, that hesitancy should have been like, okay, we know we have to get Christian sometime, but the reason why Elizabeth is a target, if truly this is the reason, is that we already have other votes too. Like, there won't be a counterinsurgency because people will be voting for Elizabeth. Now, in her mind, she thinks that is why it's a strategic advantage. If we already have two, one or two Davids voting for Elizabeth, we'll just go the other way because we have to take out targets. And that's her whole mindset this entire game. There's why vote out Natalie is not important. Jeremy is the real threat. We have to get him now. It's the same deal. And this is the same thing. Christian is the big threat. We have to do it now. It's like, no, you can wait. Voting out a body has value. You don't always need to win everything now, but in her mind, you do. And that's not a great way to play unless everybody else is on board. And you should feel like, hey, the last person who seemed to be really pushy about stuff was my best friend in this game, and she's no longer here right now. Like, frankly, her whole action should just be like, I don't trust Alec. We should find out where he's at before we do anything risky.
Yeah, like they talked about it a little bit at the feast, and they did, but then it just like was dropped, and then it's like, okay, Alec's with us.
Yeah,
I feel like they should have maybe been a little more concerned there, but all right.
He still seemed to have free reign to just go talk to David's by himself. Yeah, so and I think it's just. Another problem is if you're the person that's always like, we have to take this person out, they're such a big threat, why bother voting for this person right now? They're not threatening. That would make me uncomfortable if I'm another person who could easily be perceived as a threat. Yeah, I don't know if I want to team up with the person who's always big game hunting if I'm Dan and John.
Yeah, it's very sort of similar to Gabby in the pre-merge, when they were targeting Lyrsa because she's weak in challenges, and she was like, well, are they going to see me then as the weakest, and they'll go after me next?
And yeah, maybe. Absolutely. Well, yeah, and that's the thing. So all she did is make people uncomfortable, but she doesn't notice that at all. And yeah, to your point, exactly, it's like they change it back. It's like, why would everybody? It's like they clearly didn't agree with you. Learn from this. But that's not what she is capable of. In fact, that's not what she is there to do. So how do you feel about her? Because obviously people have been, kind of expressing over the past 2 weeks, including myself, that they're a bit of a fan of what she's bringing to the season. How about what do you feel?
I mean, she's like one of those characters where it's like, yeah, she's definitely entertaining, but I also can't stand her.
Yeah, I'm right there too, and this is kind of how I was with Natalie. I'm about ready. It's yeah. I think because what you need for this character is to see them fail. And it can only go so far before it's no longer failure so much as, people leave this game sometimes threatening people. I don't want Angelina taken out because she's a threat. I want her taken out because she rubs people the wrong way.
Which is actually what, and this is a good question. What I can't kind of decide is whether, it's better for her to be voted out where she'll see herself as a threat and feel like she's a very important jury member and probably do a lot of, especially with the new format, do a lot of grandstanding and a lot of stuff. Or is it better for her to be a 0 vote finalist and have people rip her to shreds?
This is a good question. Yes.
That's what I think.
I guess the be how long can we tolerate her?
Yeah, that's the thing, and I'm not sure. I'm truly not.
Now she will keep bringing things, and she's not like as annoying as like say like an Abby Maria or anything like that.
Agreed.
But often, especially, even if it's not true of the person, it is often true of how they are presented on television shows like this. The act can wear thin because it's going to be, I feel like it's the same thing with Angelina. And right now it's still building that it's fun that, especially in this episode where she is somewhat gently rebuked and she just thinks it's the greatest approach ever, to the point where I think
you try to change things and not just get voted out, even though I'm sad about you being voted out. How can you not appreciate how much it hurts for me to vote for you?
Yeah, how dare you? No, her imperiousness at tribal council was just perfect, because I look, I understand where she's coming from. It's like I was trying to do you a favor, but it's like, well, you weren't, for one, and for two, she's trying to stay in the game. Of course, it should be fine. You should be magnanimous about this, especially because it's not even what you wanted. Why do you think she approached Elizabeth? Because the going theory, and I think there's something to it, is that she was trying to curry favor for the juror. I'm not even sure if that's was it. I think she was just pissed that she wasn't getting her way, and she wanted to talk to about the only person who would be on her side in this.
Yeah, I mean, there maybe was a sense of, wanting to curry a little favor, but especially because everyone viewed it that way and we know how transparent she is. So I feel like that vibe must have been there a little bit. But yeah, I think she was mad, and she had no one, she doesn't really have like a tight ally. Like she's, sort of close with John, but John is also close with Dan, and Dan was the one who was, it wasn't his idea. It was really Alec who pushed it, but Dan was the one who was like being forceful about it and instigating. So that's who she was mad at.
Yeah.
So she didn't really have anybody to talk to.
Yeah, I think that she went to Elizabeth because this was the only person who would feel similarly put off by the fact that they weren't doing what Angelina wanted. And I think why people interpreted it as currying jury favors, well, A, it probably was a little bit that, but B, I think people have quite easily figured out that all relationships with Angelina are transactional, and thus everything she's doing. So it's like, why is she doing this? What is she trying to get out of this? There were no jacket requests, so it must be this.
And should ask for the hat.
That's right. I truly hope that the story of the jacket had already made its way around.
I know. Like, I understand why they wouldn't show that footage, because it wouldn't be that good, but I also desperately want to see everyone react, because you also know that Mike White would be able to tell it very well. And yeah, that would have just been so fun.
Yeah, Brad, let us know if there's any secret scenes about this. No. Who does that? No, if that bonus scene exists, Brad can let us know, and we might actually watch it. All right, let's move on to another person who had a bigger role this episode. That'd be Gabby. We already briefly discussed what I think she was doing with Elizabeth, and I really do believe it was just like, hey, sure, do something, egg her on. I'm still going to vote for you, but hey, give it a shot. But what did you think about her tears at tribal council as she's trying to argue? And I suppose Gabby's tears in general.
Yeah, well, I think these tears are sort of different ones. Like, I mean, I think it was either Rob or Steven actually pointed this out on KIA, Know-It-Alls, I think. But it's that usually they're in like private moments. And like, yeah, maybe it's not super exciting for the viewer to watch, but like as a player, that's when she should be crying. It's the same as like when bitching people out. Like, do it in a confessional where it's just for the editors, like, and people aren't viewing you that way. Now, they might still be viewing, obviously she's cried in front of Alison and Christian and stuff, and now everyone. But I also think it's different because the motivation, like the tears at this tribal council seem to be about like frustration and not like sadness or like anxious. And I can really relate to that because, as you guys know in Slack, like, I do not cry at movie theaters. I will cry if I'm watching a movie alone, but if I'm like
that's your confessional time.
Yeah. If I'm with friends or at a theater, movies don't make me cry. You can name the movies you think I will have cried at. You will be wrong. But yeah, if it is in front of people, like, there are definitely times where, because when you're watching a movie, you don't have to talk. But if you know, so just like frustrating or you're upset and you have to speak through that, that's when it comes out. Some people are just, you know, women particularly, I think, just because of society, are, you know, more angry criers or frustrated criers rather than like I am sad and upset criers. And so I think she's sort of annoyed and frustrated as the situation, and she's just like talking through it. Like I've definitely had times talking to like my brother, like other family members, I'm crying through something, and I was like, you know, like just ignore it, you know, that I like just can't help it. And he's like, yeah, I know, just like you're mad at me, obviously, so that's great, but like we're just gonna go past it and not like talk about like pity and be like, oh my gosh, we need to discuss. It's just what's happening. And given what she was saying, like, and what her words were, I feel like that was sort of the situation. She was like frustrated with, like, with Angelina being like offended at Elizabeth like fighting for her life, and that just came out while she was trying to just express the normal frustration.
Yeah, I think Gabby's tears so far in this game are kind of like, you know, racism and Survivor, in which all individual situations have explanations that, you know, can be rationalized or whatever. It's the cumulative effect, and that I think, you know, as you said, oh, she just does it in confessionals. Oh wait, no, she's done it with Christian. She's done it with Alison. Now, it should be noted, in both of those cases, it worked in her favor. It, you know, drew in empathy from those people. But I think it does show that, you know, her reaction to stressful situations, of which Survivor is incredibly stressful, is to cry. And I want to be clear, I am not going to be a person who expresses annoyance at somebody experiencing that which humans call emotions. Just because I am a broken person doesn't mean other people need to be. And thus, yeah, I don't think less of her because that is her reaction. However, I do think less of her chances at winning Survivor, because I don't know if the crier wins Survivor.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, we've seen that. We saw that with Dawn, and then it wasn't really with crying, but especially because it's a similar archetype, I think that was a lot of Hannah's problem, is that it's not like the act of crying, but it's that it makes people feel like you aren't like emotionally stable and you need to be helped. And if you need to be helped, then you weren't doing it yourself.
Yeah,
and then
and some of it is gendered. Some of it absolutely is people, you know, less enlightened me. It's like, you know, crying equals weakness. But more of it is that, you know, if you are, even the people that she is bonded with, even with an Alison or Christian, and if it happens with other people, is that once you start to bring in that empathy and that feeling that I need to protect Gabby, oh, that poor girl, or that poor person, you know, this is a lot for them, I will help them. They don't want to get beaten by the person they were helping. It feels like then you betrayed them in a way that is far more personal than, you know, all the other betrayals that happen in Survivor. And that's what happened with somebody like Dawn and all that. That you can't be the emotional support person for the person that turns around and not blackmail. What's
Blindside?
Blindside. Yes, that's it. The thing that happens all the time in Survivor, even when it's not. Yeah. So, and I think that'll be it. And then I think mixed in with people would be like, well, clearly you weren't strong enough for this game. I saw it constantly break you. And that's unfortunate, but I think that'll be very real. So I think by the time she was done crying at Tribal Council for an argument that like really wasn't even about her, I was like, hey, we should temporarily resurrect the 0% club just so I could put somebody in it.
I do personally think if, and this is a big if, because the farther, you know, along you get, the more fraught the emotions will be. But if she can like cool it from now on, with an exception to the loved ones visit, because nobody gives it.
No, that's fine.
That doesn't count. But
that
like
helps people actually more than we saw you be human. Okay, cool.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if she's like stone cold during the loved ones visit?
Whatever.
But if you know, it's sort of two like individual people with whom she seems to be the closest, and one freak out at Tribal, and like she cools it, she could be okay.
Yeah.
But if it starts really being like a consistent thing, or then with any one-on-one, that's gonna be a big problem.
I think more accurate way of saying that is continues to be a consistent thing, because I don't know if there's an episode where it hasn't been, right? So I doubt they're just picking
Semantics.
out the few times that Gabby has cried. And that's the thing. Yeah, absolutely. If she suddenly gets it together, it could help, although it didn't really help Aubrey in some people's minds in that season, right? But those people were assholes.
Yes. And you know, say what you want about Gabby, but she didn't cross out a vote and leave it very, very legible.
Yes, not yet anyway. And she also didn't take 10 minutes to vote. So of the spazzy nerd type that she is, she still might be up ahead in terms of major gaffes anyway. All right, let's move on to the other major player of the episode, and that would be Alec. Alec? Really? Did this surprise you that he had this in? Because obviously when he made his big move at the swap, everybody's just talking about what a complete moron he is. There was no reason for it. He was played by Elizabeth and Davy, and he's just doing things. But I gotta say, after last night's episode, like, he might actually have some strategy to him. Like, everything he was saying made sense to me.
Yeah. Because same. Like, I expected him to do big moves and be like flipping around or whatever because of the previews and also because of the last tribal council he was at. But he seemed to be playing well.
Yeah.
Like for one, the fact that the Goliaths didn't all shun him is a great sign for his social game. And then the strike force or whatever,
which he didn't name, by the way. We should make that's on Christian.
Yes, but the first of all, he wouldn't be. If we're gonna blame anyone for the name who didn't do it, I think it would have been Nick.
Well, Nick is kicking himself, or he's like, dude, I had another name.
I can't think of it, but no, let's close the strike force. But like the cross tribal alliance is a great idea for multiple reasons. Because like first of all, the 3 Goliaths in that alliance have all the power, because it's like, even though it's an equal alliance, they're like, well, yes, but first we have to vote out 2 Davids for this to work. That's the only way it can work. And so then, if they change their mind, they still have a majority. It's fine. I think for Alec as well, what's interesting about him is like the people he chooses to play with, I think, are not the people that one would expect him to play with. Mm-hmm. People could easily be suspicious of Mike White or Alison. Like, we always just say Mike White.
Always. I will never not say it.
Like Jeff Kent. And the famous people, I guess, always get that. But like you could easily see Mike White and Alison, maybe working with Davids eventually, because they weren't really in the main crew in Goliath. Particularly Mike White, since he was close to Jeremy. Alison, I don't know if they knew she was there. But so you could see that. But I think, even though he flipped on Natalia, like, I feel like Dan definitely thinks he's still tight with Alex, since as the boat arrived, he was like, brochacho!
Yeah.
He's got to stop saying brochacho. Also, Terry Dietz didn't invent brochacho. Dan didn't invent brochacho. It's bro and muchacho. Very easy. People have been adding bro to words since, like, Wayne's World or some shit.
No, it certainly feels like something Steve Sanders probably said in 90210.
I'm really glad you clarified 90210, because I was going to have to ask who that was.
Yeah, as I was saying, it is like, this is way too old a reference for her. Although, it is a popular,
Was that the Ian Ziering one?
That would be, yes, the 50-year-old man high school student.
You got to give me credit for knowing which actor, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't blow me away as much as if John were somehow able to follow
John, who was alive and that's the right age.
Maybe even watched it. I like, this isn't just like, you're impressed when a monkey throws a ball type situation. Like, I'm legitimately impressed with what Alec was able to do. And it's starting to be like, we might start overlooking or examining our own bias. And this happens, many seasons, maybe even every season, that the people that we talk Survivor with and talk Survivor with us, are very big and inclusive about diversity and all this, but they have no problem stereotyping one type of player, and that is semi-attractive buff people, but generally dudes. And I'm not, going to start becoming like, worry about misandry or anything like that. But it's just like that. It's always just like, hey, look, he's not a complete moron. And it usually takes like 4 or 5 episodes for them to get there. Until then, it's always like, oh, they must have stumbled on something, but he's still a moron. And this is like with Devin. They're like, oh, maybe he actually has something. It took like near the end of the season to recognize that like somebody who, gets laid every once in a while and enjoys going out amongst people might also be able to play Survivor. It's not just, it's not so dense a strategy game that, people can't figure it out if they have social lives. And this
especially for a group that, we generally all love Malcolm. Although who, let's be clear, is obviously the god of this archetype. I don't
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we're not calling Alec a Malcolm.
No one is Malcolm. No one
it's the same idea. I'm sure it took people a while in Philippines to come around on Malcolm, and there's still some people who are like lump Malcolm in as a Joe or an Aussie, and it's like, well, yeah, popular with Facebook crowd, but they are very different personality types.
Long hair.
Yeah, and yeah,
I do want to say for the record, though, that I had faith in Jay from the start.
There you go. Yeah, and another example of this archetype.
It's lost to the Slack archives, but I definitely, and I mean, he was on my fantasy team when I was doing the fantasy team thing. But no, because like I've been around a lot of surfer type people, and so yeah, they can't all be dumb. Some people just like to surf. It's fine.
Yeah. And maybe they develop the patois of the subculture. It's the same thing where like everybody thinks like a Southerner is retarded because they speak the way of the people that they are around, but that's not always the way it is. Wow, okay. Well, I have some soul searching about using that word as a pejorative. But yeah,
I'm glad you caught it.
Yes, I did. Yeah. I'm a very old man. We'll have to work upon what was perfectly acceptable when I was growing up. It was still jerkish behavior. That's not an excuse. But Alec, I think not only was it, I think it was legit, like really good strategy. And for the points that you made, this is a good alliance for him in that not only is it, unexpected, but it's also 5 people he feels like he can beat with his attributes. Now, he might not be able to. In fact, I'm going to come out and say that he is not going to. But, if you're Alec, you're thinking, oh, if I could form a strategic alliance with 5 non-physical players, that could be where my physical, abilities will take me, to the win. Whereas, competing against other people similar of, like Dan or John, that's not what he seems to be interested in. And people before he just did an Italian move just to do it. And to be clear, maybe he did. I'm not necessarily now going to prescribe genius to it, but maybe there was some thinking behind it because it doesn't seem like he's impulsive either. He seems like he has this plan and he's ready to wait for it to come into motion. So I'm just saying that we might need to stop just saying, oh, what a shock. He's not an idiot. Or he lucked into a good idea and start thinking it's like maybe he knows what he's doing. Watch, he's totally going to get destroyed next week after all that.
Yeah. Well, in terms of how you're saying though about also how people talk and stuff, I mean, we even have Nick as an example. He's a lawyer, but he's from Kentucky and he sounds like it. Not to call you out, Ms. Sweater fan, but I saw, she had a comment about, Alec saying, she was like, okay, like a lot. And that at first she thought he was imitating a Valley girl, but then, he might just be like a Valley boy. Well, again, I said this before, but he's from San Clemente. That's far from the Valley. That's Orange County. But also in defense of those of us who were born and raised in California, it's like has replaced it has also replaced says it. Everyone I know, at least of my generation, does it. I do it all the time. I do it when typing. I'm sure you can attest to that. And not that I don't think she was saying he's unintelligent, but just because we were on that topic anyway. Yeah, that's one of those things that kind of a surfer bra dude accent, not accent necessarily, but talk will maybe think someone is not smart, but they might just like the ocean. Yeah, I've never liked surfing, but I grew up in a major surf town, and a lot of valedictorians have surfed.
Yeah. And another thought of this alliance he formed, it's Gabby, Christian, and Nick. along with Mike. It's like, what's interesting is I think some people assume this going in, is that was the tribe he was supposed to be on, or at the very least, when you're looking at the initial Goliath tribe, there are two people who don't fit into the idea of Goliath. One is Mike White, who was successful, so that's where they put him in. But nothing about his personality or anything like that is Goliath-like to what he himself copped to in a pretty good interview with Josh Wigler. That if you haven't read, you should check it out. It's just like he felt a bunch of hard bodies and competitive aggro Goliath types, and then he's just there. And then Alec is the other one because
he's the reverse of that, really.
Yeah, he looks like he fits in, obviously, and that's probably why they decided to put him there. But he is a bartender. He hasn't taken the world by storm by any sense.
He's Tom Cruise from Cocktail. Maybe. I haven't seen that movie, but I assume he was a very good bartender.
You're the queen at making references too old for yourself that you don't really know, but you understand the context of.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying bartender equals dumb, but it's just like if they're defining Goliath as highly successful or competitive, that doesn't fit, and so. Maybe that's why he feels this, kinship with, Christian and all that, which, why is he so into Christian? I love that dude. I love that guy. Is that maybe he was an odd fit for the Goliath tribe all along?
Yeah, it is funny because, none of the Davids in that group were on his swap tribe.
Yes.
Like he didn't it wasn't like he paired up, because all the Goliaths were on different swap tribes. So you could see a world where it's like, okay, Mike brings in one person, Alison brings in one person, he brings sort of like the Goliath gals about, before.
That super successful plan of Natalia bringing in Alec.
Yeah, that worked out real well. But where they each bring in a guy, like you could see it being in that version, but instead Alison, which good for Alison, brought in two people, and Alec brought in no people.
Yeah, you think like Davy, that would be the easy connection,
right?
But no, and maybe his thinking is, well, for one, maybe Davy isn't somebody he wants to compete against, or that Davy would be one that they would be on the lookout for. So right now I'm interested in what Alec what he'll be doing, and I'm willing to give him credit that he's actually knows what he's doing.
I also think it's possible that I don't know what order they figured out all this stuff, but Alison might have said like, Gabby and Christian are a pair. Like, we're not getting one of them without the other. And they're like, well, 6 is enough. And he's like, I don't really like Davy, or like, I don't think I want to work with Davy or Carl, and Elizabeth is already the target. Yeah. So
and I don't think any of them likes that dude. He really likes that Christian. He's just really into them. Just knowing nods at challenge.
I guess he made a really good impression at the feast. I mean, he did.
Actually, speaking of social game at the feast, I like his move with Gabby there.
Yeah, no, that was good, because it's good on a lot of like sort of like Hannah and Ken, although Alec is no Ken. I want to make that very clear. but Gabby itself said that she's like good at flirting with nerds, so Alec is like not that, but it's very just simple, easy banter that like, oh, obviously he's just talking about the fruit date, but there's also like, oh, like he was willing to even say that, you know.
You can see that little charge.
Yeah. And it was a good move. Because I'm sure there were dates on other parts of the table he could have gone.
He could have just reached. We don't even know if he likes dates. All right. So that's somebody who did, some clever little fun flirting. Let's talk about somebody who's not as clever with their flirting. And that would be Dan, who just can't not tell Kara about his idols.
Yeah, he just really is smitten with Kara.
Damn it. All right.
No, it is funny. I mean, just the like, oh, I missed you so much. I missed you too.
Yeah, maybe right now let's just talk about both of them because it's the same. It's like, do we think Kara is into him at all? Like, other than like she likes him, he's a nice guy and a useful, tool in her kit. But I don't think she likes Dan the way that Dan likes her at all.
No, I'm sure she thinks he's fine, but considering that he's from Florida and she lives in San Diego, I don't think she's not gonna move to Wisconsin for him.
Yeah.
It's
But even just beyond that, because, you know, when you have that summer camp vibe, you don't think far ahead. I don't get the impression she's ever been into him, you know, from the start when he's all like, oh, you know, Kara is my dog, Supergirl. And she's like, yeah, okay. Yeah. Like, I feel like that's how she's been with him this whole time. Like, oh, yeah, no, Dan, you're great. But it's never been, you know, the same way for her. And I kind of dig that about her.
Yeah, although it's also kind of funny to imagine that this is where him like being a secret nerd was like a downfall, because where she's like, yeah, it's so funny, the girl from Superman is named Kara too, when like, so she's like probably been told this once in the past and is like vaguely aware, and he's like, oh yeah, Kara, that's who my dog's name. You mean Supergirl? Yeah, Kara. She's like,
yeah, she's actually, depending on what part of the reality you're talking about, she's either his cousin or she's from a different alternate planet. It's like, yeah, that's right.
It's like, okay, this sounds like, you know, what town is like once a year.
Yeah. Oh, somebody told me that her name was the same as mine, so I put a Supergirl shirt on once on Halloween. Yeah. Frankly, there's nothing worse than you think somebody is on your side with the geek stuff and then they're not at all. It's like, oh no, I revealed too much. I can't believe I told anybody I watched Survivor.
I mean, when talking about Survivor to friends I know who watch Survivor, who I've gone to finales with, I sometimes pretend I don't know as much as I do. Like, oh yeah, it's kind of like, oh, what was that one season with Jeremy, the girl who won that one? And like, when I'm really like, yeah, when Natalie Anderson was like, did you vote for who I told you to vote for? That was awesome.
Yeah. I could list right now the boot order of that season. Getting back to Dan, what did we think about how he reacted to Angelina's push to get Christian out? He was very petulant.
Yeah. I mean, I understand him being concerned when he found out Elizabeth was gunning for him and wanted to vote out.
Yeah, it's not a good look, his reaction, but it's...
Yes. No, and I understand that he has a relationship with Christian, but neither of them came out looking good after that. We already talked about Angelina, so yeah. First of all, pro tip, never say sweetheart. Just don't do it, man.
There's no other reason to do it than you're trying to weaponize your own misogyny. That's totally... Even if you don't know, you know what you're doing. That's just what you're doing.
Yeah, unless it's like literally the person you are in a romantic relationship with. And I don't mean Kara, but like an actual person you are in, and that is an established pet name.
Or maybe if you are their grandmother or mother, that can work too.
I will say, yes, having worked sort of a retail / food service situation, old women saying honey, sweetheart, not my favorite, but fine. You know, random people, weird, middle-aged men, the worst.
They're probably pairing with You Should Smile. It was not a good look for Dan. What do you think of Dan? Like, what's your opinion on him in general?
Well, it's interesting because before that, you know, kind of bad look, he just seemed affable, but like not the he I think seemed like what we maybe were perceiving Alec to be, just kind of not like dumb in a like intellectual way necessarily, but you know, not maybe head's not quite in the game. Yeah, good at finding idols apparently. Good, and I will give him credit for knowing like, oh yeah, it's probably because he's not like a longtime fan, for knowing like, oh yeah, they're probably hidden the same way, and I have that advantage, so I should look for it now that I'm at a new beach. Good job. You know, it's a bad job telling everyone you have the idol.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, it's two parts. One, he's so proud of himself, and two, most especially, he is deeply in love with Kara. Well, one moment I really loved from Dan was his personal self-affirmations.
Oh God, I forgot. That was great.
It was so great, the challenge. And what I love especially is that he seems to be repeating the advice that somebody told to him, that like he forgot to edit to make it first person. Just keep telling yourself how awesome you are. Well, that's not the same thing as saying you're awesome, man. I mean, tell yourself that you're awesome is one step removed from what you were trying to accomplish in that scenario.
Also, this is like definitely what 300-pound Dan was telling himself while he was doing reps in the mirror, right?
That's right. Yeah, good for him.
I also did like his confessional where he called out Carl for being drunk. He's like, Carl's drunk and telling everyone everything. Like, that was fun just because you so rarely have it spelled out that someone's drunk on Survivor.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like Dan well enough. I think the role that he'll play, he's fine, and I don't really see him exceeding his role. What do you think of Kara? Because she's quickly becoming one of my favorites. Not so much for what happened in this episode, but I really think she's got something going.
Yeah, is that her hair or smile?
That too. She is very stunning at this point. How does her hair have such shine? It's this very long into the game. But more, yeah, I like the way that she's got Dan wrapped around her finger in a way that doesn't even feel like outwardly manipulative. She just knows how to. Yeah, I'm sure this is the first time she's felt that reaction from men before.
I mean, she was an NFL cheerleader. I'm sure she's dealt with it.
Yeah, and she knows how to deal with it in a way that doesn't, like, again, as I said, I haven't gotten the vibe that she's really doing much to do it. So she's not, throwing herself at him. She's not, manipulating completely. She's just like, okay, I can use this. And I feel like she also seems like somebody that is ready to, maneuver if, that has to happen. She seems to have more, maneuverability in her game than, say, like an Angelina or a Dan do.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't great when she just like believed Alec whispering in her ear at that first tribal, and was like, "Oh, he says it's fine."
Yeah, maybe at that point though, she's like, "It's not me." So
yeah, it's like, whatever. He's just like, "I'm not going to be able to stop it." So, but I thought after that, she did very well. Yeah, I mean, she's playing. It's not anything super hard, but she's only been to a couple votes. I think the problem with being close to someone who has two idols is in a pair is that they'll target you instead. Yes. But when someone has two idols, they're a little more willing to play them on someone else. And if Jeremy will play an idol on Steven, you best believe Dan would play an idol on Kara.
Yeah, it really will only require her feeling like it needs it. And then she will ask him and he will do it. So it'll just be a matter of whether she can feel like it's, if she's the threat. Especially because, she knows that he has two idols and he knows that she knows because obviously he was the one to tell her. So she can just flat out ask for it and it could happen very easily. It's hard to imagine a scenario where Dan says no.
And Elizabeth seemed to be the one who was most aware of their pairing, and she told Alec, and Alec told them, and now Elizabeth is gone.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't something that bounced onto her. All right, speaking of Alison, she is in what may be the core alliance of the show. She won a challenge, so her parents can be proud of her now. Here, you haven't been around to discuss this. I've obviously, poo-pooed it a bit, and then John did as well last week. Was her purpleness an over-exaggeration by hyperactive fans?
I mean, she was definitely barely in those episodes. That is true. I think since then, she has had a decent amount of screen time. I think these last two episodes. And, Goliath didn't go to tribal 2 episodes in a row, and then it was unanimous, and she just probably wasn't involved. And I think given the editing that has been happening this season, they seem to just genuinely be focusing on when there's a story.
Yeah. Sometimes people are less in Survivor when they're not relevant to the plot. But now, they've been building towards, her relationship with Gabby, her, desire to move on Dan. I feel like yes. And so I think that she's in it now. Now, she may not be the most dynamic personality, but my general feeling and impression on Alison is she's fine.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I enjoyed her at Tribal Council. I liked, and maybe it's just because I am annoyed by Angelina, but in a way that's entertaining. I liked her calling out that Angelina was doing it for jury votes. I thought not only was that sort of good, even though you might want to be like the united front, I think since she is in that cross-tribal alliance, it sort of shows like, hey, like I'm not super tight with everyone on Goliath, so you can believe that I actually want this alliance. Plus it was just satisfying.
And also it shows that she's maybe with the Goliath. It's just that Angelina was not at that moment, right? So that shows her as more of a united front with everybody else who was very put off by her actions, and is like, yeah, she's not with us. Let's get her, So yeah, no, when we've seen her, she seems competent. She seems highly intelligent. She's fine, and cool it with the purple Alison stuff, especially because maybe there's a different purple person, which we'll get to.
Well, can I say one more thing about Alison too?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I also think that in the pointing out Angelina, as you were saying, like she is, Alison is very intelligent. She's also very good at the puzzles, maybe a step below Christian, but she's very good at them. And she's pretty athletic. She's very tall, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily help that much, but she is so tall. And by kind of putting a thing on Angelina, who's kind of the other, I feel like, smart, strong woman, Goliath at least, it's kind of like, isn't that someone you'd want to get rid of first? She's already targeting jury members. How sneaky.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do think what you've laid out there is probably what's going to be why Alison doesn't win. At certain point, she will be targeted as a threat in a way that people that are remaining will not be, or at least will be able to convince that she is more than they.
I think it'll really be a very sort of game changer, fan favorite Sierra Dawn Thomas situation in her first season.
There you go.
All right, they're both tall.
Moving on, Emma, what are your Christian thoughts?
I'm afraid I don't have any.
Well,
I was raised in a secular
household. So let's talk about the player named Christian and the way of life. Maybe they will soon become one.
Also, you know what, Christian? I've got a friend named Christian. He goes by Chris. Ever thought about going by Chris, making it less awkward for phrasing?
No, his parents named him Christian, and he's a good son. What do you think of Christian? We really haven't talked about it. People have been kind of. He's obviously, I think, at this point, the star of the season. Although he wasn't really a star of this episode, but since you haven't been on the podcast for a while, pro Christian or not?
Well, no. I like him. I think he's entertaining. I don't find, maybe there's some stuff that's like a little over the top, but I've generally liked, the nerd archetype. I think that's been documented. I think a big difference though with him and why he sort of comes across a little differently than others is that usually the nerdy guys, the nerdy super fans, are in their early 20s, and I think he's in his early 30s, and so he's established. He's not a student. He's he's got like a long-term girlfriend, and not that that's like the end all be all, but he's like in an established thing. He knows who he is. He knows who his people are. Like he doesn't, even though it was nice to hang out with the brochachos, he also knows like he's got a life back home. He's a professor. He's gonna be fine. Yeah. And that
he just broke the hearts of so many Gabby Christian shippers by revealing the long-term girlfriend.
No, and I mean I get the appeal, guys, but sometimes people are friends, and that's okay too.
That's right. That's why he very much emphasized the friends part.
Yeah, it's funny because I will admit too, like in that first episode when he said it, I thought I totally saw it as like the guy trying to be like, I'm not trying to be too forward or anything. Like it's platonic. I would never assume that a girl would deign to be, but no, it's definitely like, no, we're good. Like we're partnership, platonic, of course, because like I love
honey, don't worry. Yeah. One thing that I think his highlight this episode was correcting Alison at Tribal Council with the factorials or whatever. My hope, getting back to the whole thing of like when I was discussing Angelina, that nothing annoys you more than somebody doing the thing to you that you do to other people all the time, is I hope that a lot of the people, or there's just somebody in our readership who is often annoyed by Christian and his hamminess and the way he keeps saying it, but was also one of the people who had already talked about factorials on comments before Tribal Council had ever happened. That would just be beautiful. It's like you hate Christian because he's you.
What's funny is in that, I mean, I am someone who's definitely guilty, I think, of correcting people, but it's also not something that bothers me as long as they're actually wrong. Like, If you're wrong, they're correcting. They're fixing it. I don't know.
Who doesn't like to be corrected? Yeah.
Yeah, like, sure, maybe there's a time and a place, but like, I mean, it's not like she said anything crazy like that Natalie Bolton didn't vote for Parvati.
Yeah, and Alison took it just fine. It's like, oh yeah. In the way
like,
that,
oh yeah, that's what I meant. And then
it reveals the way that Christian has ingratiated himself with so many people that they didn't find it annoying. It's like, oh yeah, you're right. And then it led to a really great moment from Dan and then from John, where he's like, oh, he totally said it before. I heard him say it under his breath. It was a fun little piece of levity.
And that's also a group he's, been with. Those are all from his old green tribe, that's name I do not know.
What should you?
Doesn't matter.
I actually might know it, but I will refuse to acknowledge it, much in the way we discussed about hiding levels of Survivor fandom. And I think it's actually, even in just that little moment, it's actually indicative of the way that Christian has bonded with people. They all like him. That's why they weren't going to all vote for him, Angelina. You need to work up to that whale. Last member of that possible core alliance. No, it actually isn't, but we'll talk about him now. Mike White. How are you feeling about Mike White this season?
He's fine. I wish he was a little funnier.
Yeah, because like in that interview with Josh Wigler, he was very funny. So many great quotes, great observations about things that were going on. Jacket Gate and Natalie and Jeremy and all that. Lots of funny stuff. Maybe he's somebody who is best when he has time to think about it. I don't know how that interview.
Right. I mean, he is a writer. He's not an improv comic or even a stand-up comedian who obviously they write their stuff, but they're crowd work, whatever. Like he's a writer. We take time, but it also could be, food, sleep.
Yeah. And just feeling like such an outsider and, you be an outsider. It also might be like somebody.
Sorry. I was going to say, we'll see if Strike Force, is successful.
Yes.
Maybe he'll be feeling a little happier, make more jokes.
It could also be a situation, and I can completely relate to this, and anybody who's looking at the runtime of this episode currently can probably understand that I can relate to this, is that reality television is best indulged in quicker short bites and sound bites, and some people get their thoughts out in longer form. Yes, we're going long, but whatever.
You all missed me, right?
That's right. And it's not as late for us. West Coast represent. I'm not West Coast at all, but there's mountains all around me, but I'm closer. All right, the other celebrity of the season, John of many last names. Well, what are your thoughts of John?
I like him as well. Similarly to Mike White, I actually don't think he's as crazy entertaining as some people who share his first name seem to think he is. But I think he's a very good player. Mm-hmm. I thought the way he handled the vote stuff with Goliath was excellent. Not just in terms of, he seemed like, well, I really like Christian, but that if that's what everyone wants, that's what I'll do. But then, other people were saying Elizabeth and, Angelina is the one he was sort of paired with. And I thought the way he, and, Alison was there too, talked to her about it was great. Because they maybe shouldn't have been like, hey, we switched it to Elizabeth, maybe take her aside first and be like, hey, people are really wanting to do that. But once they walked away and even though he was also part of the discussion that switched it to Elizabeth, he just let her go off about Dan and be like, yeah, no, of course it is. He really did steamroll that. That's terrible. I'm sorry you feel that. But they just kind of listened to him, and Alison both just kind of listened to her and in a way that I feel made her feel heard. It didn't. Mm-hmm. It was very well done, I thought.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting that the big, beefy, professional showman was like the peacemaker, the go-between, the calm, rational, person in this discussion. And I'm starting to agree that I think John might be a better Survivor player than he actually is as entertaining. Because I do think that actually, we started on, he seemed like he was going to be, this big character, and he hasn't been. He's actually just been kind of getting along, floating a little bit under the radar to the point where even Dan's like, why me? Why not John?
You do have two idols, bro. Yeah, I know they don't all know that, but it is funny that he's like, why would I be the threat?
Yeah, and it's just, I think, this is what the way that John needs to play to be successful in a game like Survivor is probably to dial back. And then, if you listen to the interview with Corey, maybe this is actually more his personality. More of his speed is to be a little more wry, to be a little, laid back, and kind of see through it all. Which case, I don't believe he actually has been lighting our screens on fire. And as a result, he's been playing really well, but, he's not the star of the season by a long stretch. He's had some moments,
funny moments, though. Like, I don't want to say it's not, I don't think he's been like boring or anything. Also, that's him after he's lost gains. Good God.
I know. Now, I think the dehydration also really helps everything just pop, because I mean that's what like bodybuilders and stuff do, is they get dehydrated to really show.
Is that why he's so veiny?
That'd be one reason. There's other people that would suggest other things.
Right. Either way, it creeps me out a little bit, but that's he seems nice.
It does. All right, Nick. What do you think of Nick? He didn't really have a lot to do this episode, but
yeah, he really didn't. He kind of annoys me, but he seemed a little less annoying last week. He's fine.
When he's up against Angelina and Natalie, he seems just fine.
Yeah, then he seems fine. I don't have a ton to say about him.
Yeah, I find I'm getting less annoyed with him as it goes on. And then he'll bring up a stupid another name and they'd be like, "Oh, Nick." But I think one thing that seems to be becoming more and more clear, I mean, again, he was brought into a core alliance, that sort of thing, is that the things that we found were annoyed by him at the beginning of the game, and maybe we found annoying throughout with the names and that sort of thing, don't seem to be translating for other people. I think he is actually ingratiating himself with people. I think people there actually really like him, to the point where they are humoring him with the silly, nickname things, to the point where Christian calls out Mason, which again, who knows the Mason Dixon who's on what, and none of it actually makes any sense.
Other way around, but
maybe it's just a call and response Marco Polo thing, like not one of them is one or the other. It's just you say Mason, I say Dixon, Mason. No, anyway, but and like Mike White in his interview was like, I thought that Rockstar's thing was stupid, but he seemed into it, so I just did it. And I think people actually are starting to like Nick. Speaking of boring, Carl.
Yeah, well, he got drunk at the feast.
Yeah, he did not hold back. He was ready. He won his battle against Elizabeth, and I don't really think it's going to go much farther than that. And then finally, Davy is a person on this season, even if he wasn't a person in this episode.
Yeah, he's really kind of the reverse Alison, in that he had, screen time in some early episodes and has really disappeared. Now, I think, at least in the merge case, and I know there's examples of this, but I cannot think of it right now, he just wasn't really part of that story. He wasn't going to be against Elizabeth being voted out, and he wasn't really approached by any Goliath, so what are you going to do?
I think, and I think he was probably really for Elizabeth, but not as obviously as Carl, and thus that's who the story, was given that storyline to. Davy talking about it as well would have been redundant. And when you have, drunken Carl just saddling up under Dan's, hammock and telling him what he wants to do, that's probably what you go with, because it's a much better show than tell.
And apparently he was, according to Exit Press, apparently he was sort of the decoy boot they were telling Elizabeth, but it's like, why even bring that up when you already have Christian as the other boot they're talking about, and then the possible, the sort of threat of Angelina insurgency and stuff, like, whatever.
Yeah, and it could just be a case when you're not involved in the plot, you're not on this episode. I think that might be a side effect of the fairly balanced edit that we've gotten, obviously with like a Christian outsizing or Angelina. I think they were probably the ones that have gotten more of the edit than anyone else on this season, but it's otherwise been fairly balanced. And maybe that flip side of that is we can't write off people when they disappear for an episode or two. It could still very well be that Davy could win the season. I don't think so, but I feel like this season I don't have a handle of like the winner is definitely these three people. I think that that is still ready to emerge. So we've kind of discussed a lot of the season via each person, but we should do this season check-in again. We probably don't have to necessarily talk about who we like or not, because hopefully we just did that. But is there anything else besides the characters of the season that you're in or out of this season?
Well, as I sort of touched on, and as I've said when I appeared before, I've enjoyed the editing, both the even-handedness that they've had, and also kind of some experimenting, some different stuff. I said this on Twitter, but I thought that was really fun, sort of the shot they had where it was like Elizabeth and Gabby talking like, well, maybe we can blow this up at Tribal, and then like the very quick shot of Angelina on the beach, just sort of like, you got this, and then cut to commercial like super fast. Like it was like weird, but it was interesting. It sort of showed, I don't know, it kind of put you in like the mindset a little more of like, okay, and now it's Tribal time. And I thought that's fun. I like that they're trying new things.
Yeah, what I like is that we don't have to waste valuable screen time on a bunch of gimmicks. We're not going through like, this is where this relic was found. This is the history of that. This is we're sending people to Redemption Island. We're going to play this silly little game or whatever. Maybe not Redemption Island, but another island. I don't care what they called it for that season. That minutes are really valuable on Survivor. Now, I will say that last season probably had a lot of minutes to spare given some of their cast, but still, I think that more than anything, when you have to spend a lot of time explaining other things and even just checking in, even when it's a dud, you still have to at least show the person arriving at a thing. That's minutes that you can't spend developing your characters. And this season has proven that it's like, just give them the time and let us know. Now, the one thing I do, maybe this is complete concern trolling, but my one worry of that, because it is such a balanced, is what if this is a cast of a bunch of Bs and there's no As? And I'm like, what does that mean? Now, maybe that's fine. Maybe that's great. Maybe it'll be great that we kind of like everybody, but we're not in love with anybody, and it will be good. But also maybe, too much parity is a good thing. I wonder, especially for myself, will I need somebody to eventually emerge as a genuine superstar for this season to be elevated, or it'll just be like a good, Guatemala season throughout? I'm not sure where I'm at there yet.
Yeah, that's interesting because, I find myself not really having a specific person I'm rooting for. I think vaguely I like the idea of, quote unquote, Strike Force, partially just because it's cross tribal. But like most of those people are all people I have like positive feelings about, and the people I have negative feelings about are not in that group.
Yeah.
So sure. And even, we were talking to casuals. A friend of mine caught up on the episode today and was texting me throughout. And so I asked her like, oh, do you have a favorite? And she was like, no, like everyone either annoys me or is boring, which is, now I don't agree that they're boring, but it's but she also didn't seem to be disliking the season because I think it's been exciting. But I think even though I wouldn't say they're boring, I think it maybe does show that there's not someone who really stands out, someone we thought a John or a Mike White would be. She did say, she's like, I like Mike White because he's Mike White, but I don't want him to win.
Yeah. No, like I am enjoying this season. I just, if it continues along this path, I worry that it's like, a basketball team with that goes 1 through 10 of scrappy players. Last season's maybe Boston Celtics once the stars got injured, but eventually, I want to see a superstar beat them, because it's not that interesting to be like, oh, they're really good at, everybody scoring 10 points. I just completely alienated you here, but that's fine.
I like baseball.
That's right. That's the one concern that like this, if nobody emerges, and at this point, it's like, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Christian? But I mean, everybody told us that if he's getting a growth at it, he cannot be the winner. And also, I also find that like a little Christian goes a long way. I think, when he is easily a character that will become super annoying if he got the traditional, superstar edit of all the time that, like even like a David Wright got. All right. So that's where we're at season check-in. Let's do predictions for next week. What do you think is going down?
Well, as much as, we were talking about not reading to the edit, it seems like they'll probably stick with the plan, for lack of a better phrase, and vote out another David. Seems like would be either Carl or Davy, because the rest are in the group protected by people. Carl is probably someone they're not threatened by, and Davy was barely in the last episode, so sure, let's go with Davy.
All right, so I actually have 2 predictions, and obviously I'll have to land on one because I don't allow for 2 within our format. But basically, it all depends on whether Christian wins immunity or not. If he wins immunity, then easy. We can't vote for Christian. Nobody can suggest that we vote for Christian. The plan can proceed to just get rid of one of the Davids and move on from there. In which case, I think it would be Carl. It's similar thinking, but with the idea that Carl does have this potential thing we should maybe get out of the game if we can. But if Christian doesn't win immunity, suddenly like Angelina is going to have to renew her argument, and it would be a good one. And it might be one where Dan and John are both like, okay, yeah, I guess we have to do it now because it is better to vote out Christian than a Davy or a Carl. Which I'm not saying it will then be Christian. I'm saying is now it's time to bust it up. We can't just go for the original plan, in which case I think they'll just say, well, Angelina keeps getting in the way. Let's get rid of Angelina. And I think that's what that 6 will want to do. And frankly, they will probably pull in Dan as well. And maybe, other, I don't, so I think, so then it's just like, do I think Christian's going to win immunity or not? I will say that he does, and I say that Angelina goes home.
See, and this is why it's good that I don't fully prepare my predictions before we do that, because I actually thought of it didn't really involve the immunity, but I thought of that very similar scenario.
There you go.
Sorry. Thought of a very similar scenario, and have also just been tempted to just keep picking Angelina until she goes
it's going to happen soon. It feels like that clock is ticking.
Yeah, right? And like it was very much in the like, well, it's only one earlier than they wanted to turn on everyone, and they want to protect Christian, so it would make sense. But you don't like when we predict the same thing, so this time I picked the boring one, and maybe I'll change my mind before we write it down if I'm allowed to.
Honestly, I think it's discouraged, but I feel like it's been done. I
probably
maybe
just one of you
maybe
forgot.
Even just simplify. Well, yes, that's most likely, and we know who that would be. Maybe just simplify it. Even it's just like Angelina's just going to keep annoying everybody. Like, let's just get rid of her. We have a 2-person advantage now, so maybe it's not even going to have to do with any of that. Or maybe it is that Christian is available to be voted for, and she will then annoy them so much that it's just her. But either way, I think Angelina's going home. All right. So that's enough, I think, for this episode. Certainly a lot, right?
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Hopefully you had a lot of traffic on the way to work today.
Yeah. If you listened to the past, I don't think it should be a great surprise that Andy and Emma equals a lot of talking. But it's and if you've been around our website a lot, you should maybe have that base of knowledge, which is at www.purplerockpodcast.com. You can follow the show, which live tweets whenever John actually watches it live at Purple Rock Pod. I am at Purple Rock Andy.
I am Purple Rock Emma.
And you can subscribe in the various ways you can do that, or watch us on YouTube. Either you're doing that right now. There's certainly some people I'm seeing in the bottom corner. More of you later. I will try to hopefully get the full audio from this video recording and post that instead of like somehow lopping off 10 minutes and then taking 5 attempts to fix it. That's what I'm going to try to do. That's my promise to you next week or this week. And then next week, we've said it before, maybe it'll actually happen this time. It will be me and Matt, a reunion of the Infinity Stone podcast.
Yeah, and the lesser of Blackjack and Hookers.
That's right. Hookers.
Yep. Because we decided that I had to be Blackjack, otherwise it was sexist.
That's right. No, it's just perfectly fine. All right, anything else?
No.
Hit the music. Which I will do much later in post-production, not now.
I figured you want